Imagine you are sitting inside uh, a heavily armed, fortified position.
Okay.
You have 2,100 well-trained troops at your command. You're looking out at an enemy force that has, just a fraction of those numbers.
Right, so a massive physical advantage.
Exactly. By every law of physics, every rule of military doctrine, and every tangible fact on the ground, you are invincible. So why, less than 24 hours later, without a single shot even being fired, do you run up the white flag and surrender your entire army?
Well, it sounds completely irrational until you realize that physical facts on the ground, they're really only half the equation. The other half, and the part that actually dictates human behavior, is the perception of those facts.
And that is exactly what we're unpacking in today's deep dive. We have a fascinating stack of notes here that completely shatters this comforting illusion we all have that reality is just binary.
Yeah, that things are just easily categorized and counted.
Right. And our mission today isn't just to look at how psychological warfare works on a battlefield to defeat an enemy. We're going to explore how the exact same psychological mechanics are operating every single day in our classrooms, our homes, our relationships, to literally shape the reality of the people we care about.
Because if you understand how to manipulate perception, you don't need to change the physical reality. You just, change the consciousness of the person experiencing it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the scenario I just described at the beginning, that wasn't a hypothetical, that actually happened. I mean, I know the broad strokes here, it's the Battle of Detroit in 1812, but you've got the actual tactical breakdown of how this impossible surrender was engineered. Walk me through what was happening outside that fort.
It is a total masterclass in exploiting the human mind.
Yeah.
So the American general, William Hull, is inside Fort Detroit with those massive numbers.
Yeah.
And outside the fort is the British general, Isaac Brock. And Brock's situation is essentially a nightmare. He has roughly 330 regular soldiers.
Oh.
Yeah. And he has maybe 400 local civilian militia members, guys, who are definitely not professional soldiers. And he's allied with about 600 Native American warriors from the Shawnee tribe.
So all in, he's barely breaking 1,300 men.
Barely. Now, standard military doctrine of the era says that to successfully attack a fortified position, the attacking force needs at least a 3-to-1 advantage.
And Brock doesn't even have a 1-to-1 ratio.
Exactly. If he attacks the walls, his forces will be slaughtered. He doesn't have the time or the supply lines to summon thousands of actual reinforcements.
Which means he has to, invent them out of thin air?
Precisely. What's fascinating here is how Brock unleashes 3 sequential, devastating psychological bluffs. First, he creates a phantom army.
A phantom army?
Yeah, she takes his untrained civilian militia and forces them to put on the discarded redcoats of the regular British army. But he doesn't just have them stand there. He organizes them into a continuous marching loop.
Oh, I see where this is going.
They march out of the tree line into an open clearing where the Americans inside the fort who are watching through their spyglasses can see them. Then they dip back into the forest, circle around out of sight, and march right past that same opening again.
It's like a Scooby-Doo chase scene, but with an army.
Yes.
So General Hull is sitting in his fort, looking through his glass, and he just sees this endless, unstoppable stream of elite redcoats pouring into the theater of war.
Right, which seeds the initial doubt. But Brock doesn't stop there. Night falls, and he executes bluff number 2, the kitchen fire bluff.
Okay, when's that?
Normally, an army conserves resources by building large communal campfires where dozens of men gather. Brock issues a bizarre order. Every single man in the camp, all 1,300 of them, must build and light their own individual campfire.
Oh, wow. So when the Americans look over the walls in the pitch black?
They don't see a camp of 1,300 men. They see an absolute sea of fire stretching out into the horizon.
That is brilliant.
To Hull's mind, the endless redcoats he saw marching earlier have now settled into an encampment of 10, maybe 15,000 men.
It's basically a denial-of-service attack on the human brain. Brock is just flooding the enemy's senses with so much false data that Hull's logic centers completely crash. He can't process the reality anymore.
That is a perfect way to describe it. But Brock knows that confusion isn't enough. He needs terror. Which brings us to the third bluff.
Yes, more.
Oh, yeah. Brock understands his opponent's specific vulnerabilities. He knows General Hull has his own daughter and young grandson sheltering inside the fort with him.
Oh, man.
So Brock sends over a beautifully crafted, highly weaponized letter demanding surrender. He writes essentially, "I do not want a massacre, but once the shooting starts, I will not be able to control my Native American allies."
That is chilling.
And to add weight to this, he allows a forged document to be intercepted by the Americans, claiming that 5,000 more warriors are currently descending from the north.
This is basically the ultimate game of high-stakes poker. Brock wasn't playing his cards, he was playing the player across the table.
And it works flawlessly. Hull's consciousness is entirely rewritten. He genuinely believes he is surrounded by an overwhelming, bloodthirsty horde. He surrenders the fort, all his weapons, and his 2,100 men, begging for their lives.
Without a single shot.
Brock conquered a fortress without firing a shot, solely by manipulating expectations. He didn't try to change the reality of his army's size, he changed the consciousness of his enemy.
Which makes me wonder, is this just a bizarre glitch in 19th century military strategy, or is this vulnerability, like, hardwired into how humans operate?
Oh, it's definitely hardwired.
Because if you can bypass logic that easily, someone must have figured this out long before 1812.
They absolutely did. To see just how deeply ingrained this tactic is, we actually have to go back thousands of years. The notes point us to a biblical narrative that, when analyzed properly, reveals the exact same psychological warfare playbook.
Okay.
It is the story of Balak and Bilaam.
Okay, set the scene for me. Balak is the king of Moab, right? And he's facing down the Israelites.
Correct. The Israelites are approaching his borders, and much like General Hull looking out at the campfires, King Balak feels a profound, paralyzing terror at their sheer numbers.
Right.
He knows his army will be annihilated in a conventional physical war. So he seeks out an unconventional weapon. He sends emissaries to hire Balaam, a man renowned across the ancient world for his devastating curses.
Wait, I have to push back here. You're telling me an ancient king facing a massive military threat decides his best tactical move is to hire a guy to throw some magical bad vibes at them?
I know, it sounds...
I mean, that seems like a massive leap from military strategy to superstition.
It looks like superstition until you dig into the linguistics.
Mm.
This is where the notes bring in the Malbim.
A Melbourne?
He's a highly influential 19th century biblical commentator, and his entire analytical framework is built on a single premise. There are no true synonyms in biblical Hebrew. If the text uses two different words that seem to translate to the exact same concept, we are missing a critical clinical distinction.
Okay, let's unpack this. So what is the distinction the Malbim catches here?
It is all in the verbs King Balak uses. When Balak first sends his messengers to hire Balaam, he explicitly asks him to use the verb ara against the Israelites.
Ara.
Yeah. The Malbim explains that an era curse is not just a spooky incantation. It implies causing actual tangible physical deficit, a loss of health, a sudden plague, an instant drop in wealth or power. For this, Balaam wouldn't even need to leave his house.
So it's essentially the ancient equivalent of a drone strike. Balak wants to inflict physical casualties from a safe distance without risking his own troops.
Exactly. Yeah. But Balaam receives a divine response that he cannot go, and he absolutely cannot use an era strike on this nation. The physical attack is completely off the table.
But Balak doesn't take no for an answer, right? He sends higher-ranking officials, offers way more money, but he changes his request.
He does. He pivots his strategy. He drops the request for ara and instead asks Balaam to come use the verb kaba.
Kaba.
And this is the brilliant psychological insight of the Malbim. Kaba does not require any mystical power to cause physical harm. Kaba translates much closer to verbal degradation.
Bro.
It means to publicly insult, to humiliate, to poke holes in someone's perceived greatness, to lower morale.
Wait, so is the Malbim essentially saying that King Balak pivoted from asking for a magical strike to asking for a public relations smear campaign?
That is precisely what it is. Balak essentially says, if you can't actually destroy them, at least come here and loudly trash talk them. He understands the Brock mechanism before Brock was even born. He reasons, if I cannot destroy their bodies, I will destroy their morale. He wants Balaam to stand on a mountain overlooking the Israelite camp and publicly degrade them.
Because if you can inject doubt, if you can make them feel small, their combat effectiveness plummets.
Right, and at the same time, hearing this famous figure mock the enemy would massively boost the morale of his own terrified troops. It's using words to manipulate mass psychology.
That is incredibly dark. He's trying to manufacture a self-fulfilling prophecy of defeat just by changing the narrative.
Yeah.
And the wild twist of that story is that when God allows Balaam to finally show up on the mountain, God hijacks the operation. Instead of delivering a Kaaba smear campaign, Balaam opens his mouth and drops these soaring, majestic blessings over the Israelites.
And think about the psychological cratering that causes for King Balak.
Oh, man.
You hire the ultimate PR mercenary to destroy your enemy's confidence, and he ends up praising their invincibility in front of your entire army. Moab's morale was utterly shattered.
Which brings up a really uncomfortable realization.
What's that?
If negative words, if a Kaaba can completely destroy an army's morale, what happens when we use psychological influence in our daily lives? Not to destroy an enemy, but to shake the people around us. Like, what happens when this operates in a classroom or an office or your living room?
That is the crucial pivot,
Yeah.
because the mechanism itself is entirely neutral. You can use it to bluff an enemy into submission, but you can also use it to construct a reality where someone reaches their highest potential.
Right.
The notes bring in a beautiful articulation of this from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. And I want to be very precise here. Goethe must be understood as a writer, a masterful novelist and poet, not a philosopher.
Okay, a writer?
Yes. In his novel Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship, he wrote a line that essentially serves as the blueprint for positive psychological warfare.
I actually have that quote right here.
Yeah.
The writer Goethe said, "Treat people as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them become what they are capable of being."
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it sounds like an inspirational poster, but you're saying this is actually a hard science.
It absolutely is. 150 years after Goethe wrote that line, two psychologists, Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson, proved it in a clinical setting.
When was this?
It was 1968, and they conducted a landmark experiment in a California elementary school. They went in and administered a standard disguise IQ test to all the students, but then they deliberately lied to the teachers.
Oh, this is the Pygmalion effect study, right? Where they just picked names out of a hat.
Correct. They randomly selected a group of completely average children. They handed this list to the teachers and said, according to our advanced metrics, these specific students are gifted. They are late bloomers on the verge of a massive intellectual spurt.
And to be clear, the kids didn't know anything about this.
No, not at all.
Only the teachers were holding this false expectation.
Only the teachers. But when the psychologists returned at the end of the academic year and retested everyone, the randomly selected kids hadn't just improved their grades. Their actual measurable IQ scores had dramatically spiked. This is the Pygmalion effect.
Okay, stop right there because this is where I get stuck. How? I understand the teachers expected them to be smart, but expectation isn't a magic wand. The teachers didn't just hand them the answers. How did a thought in a teacher's head literally rewire a kid's brain to be more intelligent?
It comes down to the self-fulfilling prophecy loop found in our notes.
Okay.
Expectation leads to attitude and treatment, which changes behavior, which dictates the result. There's no magic here, it's just human mechanics. When a teacher genuinely believes a child is a hidden genius, their physical attitude towards that child changes. They smile more warmly. They make more sustained eye contact.
So they are creating a safer psychological environment.
Yes, but it gets more granular. It changes behavioral latency. If an average student hesitates on a math problem, the teacher assumes they don't know it and quickly moves on to save time.
Right.
But if a genius student hesitates, the teacher waits. They let the silence hang. They offer a subtle physical nod communicating, I know you know this, take your time. And because the student feels that unwavering belief, their own behavior changes.
Oh, wow.
They push through the frustration. They try harder. And as a result, the neural pathways actually form. They become smarter because the environment treated them as if they already were.
It is the exact inverse of General Brock's bluff.
Yes.
Instead of flooding them with terror to make them surrender, you flood them with belief to make them succeed. But that means the dark side of this loop must be equally potent.
It is, and it's known as the Gollum effect.
The Gollum effect.
Yeah. Expecting someone to fail ensures they get less patience, fewer opportunities, and ultimately fail. If a teacher or a parent or a manager holds an expectation that someone is lazy or incompetent, the micro-interactions turn toxic.
Right. You cut them off mid-sentence.
You give them a subtle sigh when they ask the question.
Yeah.
And the person absorbs that data, internalizes the failure, stops trying, and confirms your negative expectation.
But how do you realistically apply this? I mean, it's easy to say, believe in someone, but what if they are consistently acting terribly? How do you break a negative loop that's already in motion?
It is the ultimate challenge. And to answer your practical question, we look at the final piece of our source material.
Okay.
It's the famous Hasidic story that perfectly illustrates how to execute the Pygmalion effect on someone deeply entrenched in the Golem effect. The narrative centers on two prominent rabbis, Rabbi Schneur Zalman and Rabbi Levi Yitzchak.
Okay, I am fascinated by this. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman and Rabbi Levi Yitzchak arrive in a small town, and the atmosphere is just completely bleak.
Extremely grim. They
Yes.
inquire about what's going on, and the townspeople explain a devastating crisis. A young orphaned man and woman are scheduled to be married that very evening. But the local non-Jewish police chief, a notoriously cruel man who usually ignores the Jewish community, has unjustly jailed the orphan groom right before his wedding.
Oh no.
And he's demanding a massive 1,000 ruble ransom for his release. And the town is broke.
And if they don't pay it, the groom rots in jail, the wedding is destroyed. It seems hopeless.
It does. But Rabbi Shneur Zalman steps up and decides to visit the town's richest but most notoriously stingy man. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak volunteers to accompany him, but on one absolute non-negotiable condition:
What's the condition?
absolute silence. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak must remain completely silent for the entire duration of their mission.
Which is a very specific condition to lay down. He knows something is going to be incredibly frustrating.
He anticipates the psychological resistance. Because the wealthy man they are visiting is a legendary miser. Going to him is usually just an invitation for humiliation.
But Rabbi Shneur Zalman decides to test the loop anyway.
Right. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman and Rabbi Levi Yitzchak walk into the massive estate. Rabbi Shneur Zalman eloquently lays out the tragic situation, the impossible 1,000 ruble ransom. And upon hearing the tragic story, the rich man sighs deeply, looking genuinely moved.
The ultimate plot twist, the miser's going to save the day.
So it seems. He reaches under his desk, unlocks a heavy box, and generously hands Rabbi Shneur Zalman a single rusty kopeck.
A kopeck, that's what, a fraction of a penny?
Yeah.
And it's rusty. It is a calculated, deliberate insult. I can only imagine Rabbi Levi Yitzchak sitting there, bound by his vow of silence, just silently furious. Here's a man who could write a check for 1,000 rubles, handing them a piece of corroded pocket change.
Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's instinct is the natural human reaction. He wants to engage in Kabbah. He wants to scream, shame the man, and confirm what a terrible person this miser is.
Right.
But Rabbi Shneur Zalman reacts entirely differently. He takes the rusty kopeck, grasps the miser's hand warmly, and extensively praises the man for his incredible generosity.
Wow.
He says, "What a beautiful donation, such magnanimous generosity. May the heavens bless you always for your incredible kindness."
He goes full Pygmalion. He treats him like a legendary philanthropist based on a rusty penny.
Exactly. And then they simply turn and leave. But they barely get down the road when the servant calls them back. They walk back into the parlor. The miser says his initial donation was inadequate, and he gives them 10 kopecks.
Which is still incredibly insulting. It's 10 fractions of a penny. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak must be losing his mind at this point.
But Rabbi Shneur Zalman intercepts again. He praises him 10 times more. Astounding. 10 times your original gift. Your philanthropy is truly unmatched. And they leave again.
Let me guess, called back again.
Yes. Called back again, he gives half a ruble, and they go back and forth, the donations incrementally increasing, and each time, Rabbi Shneur Zalman meets the offering with escalating, overflowing praise for the man's inherent greatness.
Until he finally breaks.
Until the rich man writes a check for the full 1,000 rubles to free the groom, plus extra for the couple as a personal wedding gift.
That gives me chills. So as they are walking back to the town, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak finally breaks his vow of silence, right? He asks how they went from an insulting rusty penny to fully funding a wedding.
He does, and this connects right back to the psychology loop. Rabbi Shneur Zalman explains that the rich man was sick with stinginess. Whenever he gave a rusty kopeck in the past, people naturally threw it back in his face and called him a miser.
Ah, the golem effect.
Exactly. They provided a negative feedback loop that confirmed his identity. But Rabbi Shneur Zalman used positive psychological warfare. By treating the man as if he were a great philanthropist, he expanded the man's heart.
The capacity for greatness was always there, but it needed the right words to unlock it. So what does this all mean?
It means we hold the power to completely rewrite someone's life trajectory just by changing the narrative we feed them.
It's just a staggering realization. When you draw a direct line through all of these sources, whether it is General Brock bluffing an army, King Balak trying to wage a PR war, teachers shaping students, or Rabbi Shneur Zalman unlocking a miser's heart, the core truth is exactly the same.
Words don't change physical reality directly. They change human consciousness. And human consciousness changes reality.
It really makes you look at every interaction differently. For you listening right now, think about your own life. When looking at your spouses, your children, or your coworkers, are we using our words to wage negative psychological warfare? Or are we actively building up their belief in their own potential?
That's the real application here.
But I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder, something that builds on the sources but goes a little beyond them.
Yeah.
We've talked entirely about how our expectations shape other people. But what about the voice inside your own head? In your own mind, you are both the teacher and the student. If the Pygmalion and Gollum effects are real, how much of your current reality, your limits, your successes, your failures, is just a self-imposed psychological bluff? And what happens if you decide to stop believing the bluff?